Future viewers, this story was written by a talented Ukrainian writer, Amira Babler. Outside, the wind had begun to pick up, rapidly gaining momentum with each passing moment. I observed the intensifying oscillation of the tree canopies through the window of my living room. I knew a storm was approaching, though there had been no storm warnings on the radio for some reason. As a precaution, I closed all the windows and partially covered the shutters. Only one window remained, allowing me to monitor the weather conditions. Just then, my wife returned from the store. "Oh, it's getting so windy out there. Almost got blown away with the shopping bags," she remarked. "Strange. The forecast didn't mention anything like this. Maybe it's just some gusts and it'll subside soon." "I hope so," she said, heading into the kitchen to attend to her tasks. I decided to call my son, who was studying in another city. "Hey son, hope I'm not disturbing you," I greeted. "No, Dad, not at all. How are you doing?" He responded, "We're experiencing quite a windstorm here. How's the weather over there?" "As usual, sunny and calm. It's pretty hot today. I wish we had a couple of clouds in the sky." We chatted a bit more about his studies and his new girlfriend before he had to end the call. I glanced out the window, but the wind showed no signs of letting up. Anything, it seemed to be growing stronger. "Johnny, maybe we should go down to the basement just in case." "Did you turn on the radio?" he asked. "Yes, of course. No new updates about the weather yet. Trust me, it's just some strong gusts." "There's nothing to worry about," she reassured me. I couldn't shake off a little unease. While tornadoes were uncommon in our area, anything could happen. Ever since a tornado unexpectedly hit our previous home when I was a child, our house was demolished within minutes, and we barely made it to the shelter in time. I had retained a fear of being caught in such a devastating storm again. Back then, the warning systems weren't as advanced as they are now. Since then, when we got married and bought this house, I focused on building a sturdy basement and stocking it with supplies, just in case. It served as our shelter during severe weather. An hour passed, and I heard Jeannie bustling around the kitchen, preparing dinner. The wind began to die down slowly, and I started to feel more at ease. "Why are you so worried?" "It's just some wind. It blew a bit stronger than usual." "It happens." Johnny came over and embraced me. I knew she was trying to comfort me and prevent any panic. However, the fear of encountering a tornado again persisted, even during hurricanes. When we got married and moved to this new place, I had taken extra precautions to secure our safety. At that moment, our neighbor, who lived across from us, knocked on the door. "Look, Gray, what brought you here?" I asked cheerfully. "Just thought of visiting you guys." "The wind got a bit scary, huh?" he said. "Yes, it was a little nerve-wracking," I replied. "Wow, something smells delicious," he said, sniffing the aroma coming from the kitchen. "Johnny is cooking up her masterpieces again, huh?" Without waiting for any invitation, he headed straight to our kitchen as if he owned the place. He had always been a bit presumptuous, which might have contributed to his success in life. But even so, there were limits. "Hey, Gray, hold on. Why don't you come to the living room with me?" "Dinner's not ready yet," I suggested. "Yeah, I'll just pop in to say hi," he replied, walking towards the kitchen. Back from where I stood, I could see him enthusiastically patting Jeannie on the shoulder. "Hey, Johnny. How are you guys doing? What yummy dish are you preparing?" he asked. "Do you have nothing to eat at your place?" She teased, smiling. "Only if you invite me. I'd love to try your fantastic dishes," he responded, not wanting to leave them alone. I also entered the kitchen. "Gray, why haven't you gotten married yet?" I asked bluntly. It seems he didn't expect such a question from me. Normally, I never meddled in his personal life, and he didn't interfere in mine. But sometimes, I felt that he paid a little too much attention to Jeannie when we were together. Yes, I was a bit jealous, but we were all around 40 years old, and I couldn't imagine any reason for jealousy at this age. Such feelings were usually associated with young people just starting their lives together. Although occasionally, things could be different. Fictions. Duke, you know, I haven't met someone I'd want to spend all my time with. Besides, I'm quite comfortable being on my own, he replied. That's sweet. But you were dating that redhead recently? That recall her names? I said. What difference does it make? We broke up. Our personalities didn't match, so to speak. Anyway, didn't you mention having a drink? So what are we waiting for? Let's go. He rushed into the living room ahead of me. Indeed, his audacity often pushed the limits. I looked at my wife, and she simply shrugged her shoulders. What could we do? That's just the way he was. As I expected, he ended up staying the night. While we were sitting and having a few drinks, Johnny finished preparing dinner, and not wanting to be impolite, she invited him to join us, which he gladly accepted. The next day was calm, unlike the previous one weather-wise. I went to work as usual, while my wife preferred to work from home. She detested offices and chose a profession, or rather an activity, that allowed her to pass the time and earn some income. She specialized in restoring old toys. She placed ads in newspapers, magazines, and online platforms. People brought her their worn-out toys from all corners of the city, and even from other towns. Some families' children were so attached to their toys that after years of play, the toys became battered, yet the kids refused to part with them. So they brought them to Johnny for repair. Sometimes, she would ask her clients to pick up supplies like paints, threads, or fabric, as she hardly had time or desire to go shopping herself. Her clients willingly helped her, as they often passed by her place anyway and could easily get what she needed. This is how she started her small business, which turned out to be quite successful. A few years ago, I even bought her an upgraded sewing machine that greatly facilitated her work, but she still did many things by hand with a needle. After work in the evening, I decided to finish something in our basement. For that, I had to climb up to the attic, where we usually stored all sorts of junk boxes and other stuff. As I emerged onto the attic, I noticed a sour-smelling stain on the wooden floor, about half a meter in diameter. I pressed it cautiously with my foot, and it easily gave way, making a faint crunching sound. Stepping back, I looked up and suspected that a leak had developed in the roof. And I was right. Some shingles had shifted, leaving not a wide but quite long gap through which rainwater could have seeped, damaging the attic floor. I knew that if I didn't address it urgently, the situation could worsen. "Johnny, hey Johnny," I called out as I descended the stairs from the attic. She rushed over to me as quickly as she could. "What happened? What's wrong?" "Our roof is leaking. We need to fix it right away, otherwise the ceiling might collapse." "Oh my goodness," you shouted so loudly. "I thought something terrible had happened to you. But still, we need to deal with the repair." "All right, calm down. You scared me for a moment there." She went back to the kitchen, and I sat down in the living room, flipping through the newspaper's classified section, looking for someone who could repair the roof. I didn't have time to do it myself since I was at work every day, except for weekends, but today was only Tuesday, and I didn't want to postpone it. After searching through the ads, I found a specialist who seemed suitable. I called him immediately, and luckily, he answered right away. I explained our situation, but he told me that he currently had a job and could only come in 2 or 3 days. What should I do? I pondered. I had to agree to his schedule. I asked him about the materials he would need for the repair so that he could start right away. After a 10-minute conversation with him, we made an agreement. "Well, have you calmed down?" Johnny entered, rubbing her hands with a towel. "Yes, soon we'll have the roof fixed. You know how worried I am about us and our home." "I wouldn't want anything to happen," I replied. "You noticed the crack just in time?" She smiled at me. I was pleased with myself and went down to the basement to finish some unfinished tasks. The next day, when I returned from work, I noticed a ladder leaning against the wall of our house, and a toolbox was placed nearby. I entered the house, calling my wife, and she didn't respond immediately. It took a few shouts before I heard her answering from somewhere above on the attic. I climbed up to see what she had forgotten there. "What's this?" "Did the worker I hired change his plans and come to repair our roof?" I asked. "No, it's great. We bumped into each other on the street this morning, and he kindly offered to help us with the roof repair." "Wait, him again?" "Yes, he's up there now. Can't you hear the tapping? I told you I already hired a worker." "Why did you call him?" "Oh, don't be upset. He volunteered, and he doesn't want anything in return. Why not let him?" I stood on the attic, trying to peer through the gap to see what Gray was doing. But it was impossible to make out anything, so I decided to go down and wait for him there. By the way, he also said he could replace the boards on the attic floor. He mentioned having some suitable ones lying around in his shed. How kind of them. I grumbled and went to the backyard to look out for Gray. Soon, he descended and greeted me warmly. It was evident that he was in a good mood. "Why did you volunteer to patch our roof?" I asked him. "And how much do I owe you for the work?" "Don't worry. Your wife has already taken care of everything." I turned to her, puzzled. She just approached us. I hadn't noticed when they disappeared around the corner, probably going to the kitchen. However, I could hear their quiet laughter, After finishing the conversation with the worker I had arranged with earlier, I went to look for them. They didn't notice me immediately, but I saw them standing close to each other, very gently hugging her waist. A moment later, my wife noticed me and turned around abruptly. "Oh, Duke, we were just talking about you," she said. "Isn't that too gracious?" I muttered and went into the house to call the other worker and cancel the order. I went to the living room and sat down at the phone. Soon, Johnny and Gray followed me, but they didn't enter the living room. They disappeared somewhere around the corner, probably heading to the kitchen. However, I could distinctly hear their soft chuckles. After finishing my conversation with the worker, I went to find them. They didn't notice me immediately, but I managed to catch them standing close to each other, with Gray gently holding her waist. A moment later, my wife noticed me and turned around abruptly. "Oh, Duke, we were just talking about you," she said. I grumbled again. "That's wrong, Duke. Well, I should be going home now. I don't want to keep you both any longer. Thank you, Gray, for your help," Johnny shouted after him. I sat at the table, waiting for her to serve the food, but all I could see was Gray holding her waist. "Why are you so gloomy?" my wife asked, putting the food on the table. "Tell me honestly, Johnny, is there something going on between you and Gray?" "What do you mean? What are you talking about? I just saw him hugging you." "Oh, come on, you're imagining things. You must be tired from work. Maybe he accidentally touched me, but it doesn't mean anything. Trust me," she reassured me, seeing my stern and displeased expression. This time, I believed her. Perhaps I really just imagined something. I began to eat my dinner, trying to get rid of negative thoughts. And later that night, Johnny decided to relive our youth in the bedroom, and the passionate night made me forget all about jealousy. The next day, I went to work with a cheerful mood after the events of the previous night. However, my workday turned out to be challenging. My boss piled up all sorts of tasks, even ones unrelated to my profession. "Isn't there anyone else to do this? You know, we recently downsized, and there are fewer people now. You're lucky to still have a job. Just do as you're told and don't ask unnecessary questions," my gruff boss replied and went back to his office. I worked all day like a cursed man, and many other workers were also dissatisfied with the situation. Some tolerated because they were used to it, while others held on for the sake of their paycheck. By the evening, I felt more exhausted than usual. When I reached the garage to get into my car and head home, I decided to sit quietly for a few minutes to catch my breath. As I arrived home, I noticed that the ladder against the house's wall was gone. It meant that Gray had finished fixing the hole in the roof. Parking the car in the garage, I hurried inside to check on my wife and see how things went. "So, dear, hi. You look so worn out today," she said, examining me. "Yes, it was a very tough day." "How is the repair going? Is the roof still leaking?" he asked. "I hope not," Gray replied, descending the attic stairs and wiping his hands with a cloth. Person's direction. I did everything as needed, even poured a few buckets of water to check no leaks anywhere. "But they forecast rain for the weekend, so we'll see then." "Why are you still here?" I asked in surprise. "Didn't you forget? I promised to work on your attic floor." He grinned at me, perhaps like a malevolent clown from horror movies, or maybe it was just my fatigue and blurred vision playing tricks on me. "I don't. Well, let's go then. I baked a pie. I'll treat you both to something delicious." Johnny invited us to the table, smiling. Once again, our dinner was shared by the three of us. For a moment, I recalled how he touched my wife yesterday, which slightly clouded my mood. While sitting at the table and savoring the apple pie, I found myself watching both Gray and my wife. She behaved as usual, engaging in conversations with both of us on various topics. However, when I observed our neighbor, I couldn't help but notice how he occasionally cast furtive glances at my wife, trying not to be noticed. But apart from that, he didn't show any other signs that could make me jealous. What am I even thinking? He's our neighbor, we've been friends for a long time, and he just offered to help. We've been helping each other occasionally for years, and my wife has always been loving and caring towards me. I'm being foolish. What did such thoughts even cross my mind? Gray visited us for a couple of days more. By Saturday, when I finally had a day off, he finished repairing the attic floors and checked everything under them to ensure no decay or mold could grow between the floor and the ceiling. I was satisfied with his work. Johnny decided to hold a little celebration in his honor and prepared several delicious dishes. Delicious dishes, even bringing out a bottle of wine from our cellar. I think we should eat inside after all. I checked the weather, and it seems like rain is coming. Johnny suggested. You're right. It's better to have lunch under the roof. I agree. Oh, by the way, I had an idea. Gray grinned. You have a lovely clearing with a table in your garden? Yes, we sometimes sit there. What's your point? He asked. Well, you could make a fantastic canopy there. It would allow you to sit outside even during the rain without getting wet. Why not? That's not a bad idea. How come you didn't think of it earlier after all these years? Johnny supported the idea. Well, you know what I'm busy with all the time? Gray replied. Yes, and what? You're only concerned about the bunker. Janani teased him. I apologize for the impertinent question. But since you brought up the bunker, do you know that my basement is quite small? Can I seek shelter at your place if needed? Gray asked with a pleading look. I looked at my wife and she looked at me. Why not? We're not strangers after all. A minute later, we all heard a loud rumble outside and the sky turned gray, covered with thick clouds, and it soon started to rain. The wind ticked up too. It wasn't a hurricane, but the weather turned quite unpleasant. Oh, shall we go up to the attic and check how things are up there? Gray suggested. We all agreed and went upstairs, quickly inspecting the area that had been leaking not too long ago. We didn't notice a single drop of water. Nothing got wet. Gray walked around the entire attic and carefully examined the roof to see if there were any other leaks. Finding nothing, he returned to us. Seems like everything's fine, he said. At that moment, a loud clap of thunder resounded, and Johnny, standing closer to Gray, grabbed him in fright. I turned around and saw him patting her shoulder. It's just a thunderstorm, don't be afraid, he said. Sorry. I just got scared. She quickly moved away from him when she noticed me. We descended back downstairs and continued our celebration. However, this time, my mood wasn't as joyful as before. I was greatly concerned that during the thunderstorm, Johnny clung to him, not to me, her husband's. Maybe I'm just overthinking things, and it's merely a coincidence of events that seem inappropriate to me regarding my wife's behavior. Surely a few days passed. The roof and ceiling were in good condition. Jenny and I continued with our usual family life. Just evenings to say hello. Sometimes we bumped into each other on the street, chatting about various everyday matters. One day, after work, I decided to stop by the store to buy a few household items. See, I ran into another neighbor who lived 3 houses away from us, and it happened that we rarely had conversations. So Hidesi greeted me. Hey, how's it going? We shook hands in greeting. Everything's fine with me. I heard Gray fixed your roof. How did it go? He asked. We know he turned out to be quite skilled at it. No leaks anywhere. He didn't even ask for any payment. Just helped us like a good neighbor. Good neighbor, you say? He replied with a hint of something in his tone. I don't understand. What do you mean? Well, if he finished fixing your roof, then why does he come to your place every day? Or did you assign him some other work? I have some repairs to be done too. How every day? Fixings, are you sure you're not mistaken? I replied, sorry, I thought you knew. Do you know what he's doing there? No, unfortunately. I only saw him enter the house, and a few hours later, he comes out. I thought you had a major renovation going on? Yes, indeed. Innovation. Thank you. Goodbye. I hurried to the cashier to return home as soon as possible. When I returned, Johnny was home alone, sitting in her workshop, busy repairing old toys. She seemed calm as if nothing was amiss. Upon hearing me enter, she turned and looked at me with her innocent, sweet face. So dear, you're back already? Yes, as you can see. But tell me, what do you do all day while I'm away? What silly questions? The usual routine, you taking care of the house and working. Why? Has something happened? You tell me what happened. Why does Greg come to your place every day? Spending hours there? What nonsense. Where did you get that idea? Don't lie to me. I was informed that he visits you. What are you two doing there? Your innovations, you say? No, he doesn't come every day. He just visited once. I offered him some tea, and we chatted, that's all. Don't lie to me, I said. Why are you acting like this? Who told you that Gray visits me? Jack, our neighbor. Jack. He simply lied to you. He came asking to borrow a large sum of money, and I refused. Apparently, he made up that story to sow discord between us. I find it hard to believe. Just tell me the truth. Honestly, I felt anger welling up in me, whether from jealousy, my wife's lies, or the possibility that she was truly innocent. I had foolishly fallen for our mad neighbor's tales. Nonetheless, from that moment, I decided to find out the truth for myself. You know what, dear? There's nothing between Gray and me, or you're worrying over nothing. You look so tired. Why don't you lie down or take a bath to calm down? I'll prepare something delicious for you. Realizing that I wouldn't get any answers from her and that even confronting Gray would likely lead to nothing, I decided to act on my own. I agreed to her suggestion, apologized for my behavior, attributing it to fatigue, and took a calming bath with bubbles. The next morning, I got ready to go to work as usual. However, instead of heading there, I went to a doctor I knew and paid him to give me a sick leave certificate. He's armed with it. I went to work and handed the certificate to my boss, pretending to be sick, making an effort to cough more than necessary. That's a shame that you won't be here for a few days. But well soon and come back. My boss said, perfect. He believed it. Now I had plenty of free time to find out the truth for myself, whether Jack had told me the truth or if it was all a ridiculous coincidence. Parking my car on a nearby street, I walked to my house through the backyards, hiding in the shed where I had a perfect view of the yard, our house entrance, and even Gray's front door. I had to sit there for quite a while, several hours. Thankfully, I brought a water bottle and a couple of sandwiches. I put my phone on silent, just in case. Sitting by the small window, leaning against an old sack of junk, my body began to ache. I decided to get up and take a few steps to stretch. As I stood up, I saw Gray coming out of his house and heading towards ours. My pain was forgotten in an instant. I was extremely curious to see what would unfold next. Gray approached our house and knocked on the door as usual. Soon, Jenny opened the door and let him inside. I couldn't see anything unusual yet. I kept watching, finding the windows of my house, which, fortunately, were not covered with curtains. I squinted to observe what was happening inside. My vision was slightly blurry, and I regretted not having gone to an eye doctor earlier to get glasses or at least binoculars. Nevertheless, I could still distinguish silhouettes. Hunching them, I saw them walk in, looking in the living room, sitting at the table for a while, seemingly drinking wine. That scoundrel, I muttered to myself. It wasn't that I felt sorry about the wine for my wife, but the fact that she was drinking it with another man in my absence infuriated me. I continued to watch, and I saw them hugging before slowly heading upstairs, probably to the bedroom. I could also see the bedroom window quite well from the shed. I kept observing, and when I saw what they started doing in there, my blood began to boil with anger. I realized that Jacques had told me the truth, and my wife and Gray were making a fool out of me. But both of them are in their 40s. What's the point of starting an affair? Or maybe they've been sneaking around behind my back for a long time. And I, like a fool, didn't notice anything, blindly trusting my wife. When I saw them undressing and getting into our bed, I couldn't bear it any longer. The front door was locked, and I rummaged through my pockets, searching for the keys. Realizing I had left them in the car, I went to the back door, which fortunately was unlocked. I entered and rushed up the stairs. It seemed that Jenny and Gray had heard my footsteps, as by the time I entered the bedroom, they were already nearly dressed. Gray was wearing only his trousers, while Jenny's dress hung disheveled. "El Duke, why are you home so early?" my wife asked, looking puzzled. "Hey, I just came in because Jeannie said there's plaster falling here and I needed to check it out," he tried to make an excuse. "You filthy liars! You dare to lie to me again!" Filled with hatred, I lunged at Gray and knocked him down to the floor. We wrestled for a while, and he even managed to grab my throat and started choking me. I tried to pry his hands off as much as I could. Next, in my peripheral vision, I noticed a vase lying nearby, having fallen from the table during our struggle. With great effort, I reached for it and swung it with all my might, hitting Gray on the head. The blow was so powerful that he lost consciousness for a while, still coughing and rubbing my choked throat. I got up from the floor. "Well, what do you have to say now? I saw you." "How could you? I trusted you," I asked, filled with anger. "Sorry, Duke," she simply said. I approached her and struck her hard across the face with the hammer still in my hand. She fell unconscious onto the bed, which was still unmade. I decided to take some action to reduce my own responsibility, but punishing them for such lies and betrayal was necessary. Gray was still unconscious, and I dragged him up to the attic, struggling to lift him. I pulled him to the window overlooking the back. Overlooking the backyard, I found a hammer in the toolbox and started smashing the window frame with it. Again, I brought Gray's body to the window and began pushing him out. He started regaining consciousness during this time. Realizing what I was trying to do, He began to struggle again, but I hit him on the wound that had already been inflicted by the window frame, and he weakened slightly. I pushed him out of the window, and he fell down. I didn't bother to look if anyone had witnessed what happened. Usually, all the neighbors were at work at that time, so I wasn't overly concerned. I descended back to the bedroom. My wife was starting to regain her senses. She sat on the bed, rubbing her sore cheek, which must have hurt quite a lot. That states, "Well, will you confess now?" he asked. She looked at me with horror. I only then noticed that I was still holding the hammer. "Duke, please forgive me." "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Tell me, what for? Why did you do this to me?" "I don't know," she replied, beginning to cry. "Then, sirs, he was just so. I couldn't resist. Please forgive me." "You wretch. I trusted you so much. I knew. And what about him? What did you do to him?" Don't worry. It was just an accident. He came to repair a house, right? Well, he finished the job." She was terrified by what had happened, sensing my anger in my eyes. She jumped off the bed and ran towards the door. Gray, she called out, but he didn't respond. "What did you do to him? I already told you. It was an accident." She ran farther, but I caught up with her, not intending to harm her in any way, just trying to talk to her and seek fidelity from her in the future. But when I caught hold of the edge of her dress, she stumbled and fell against the railing, which we were standing beside. In fear and panic, she tried to evade me and escape, but she lost her balance and toppled over the railing. I managed to grab her hand. "Duke, please don't let go. I don't want to die," she pleaded. The distance to the floor below was significant. I held on to her as much as I could, but both of our hands were sweating from either the heat or fear. Gradually slipping, her hands slipped out of mine. I just stood there, leaning over the railing, watching her scream as she fell. Several days passed. Fortunately, Joni survived the fall, but she suffered severe damage to her spine, and from then on, she was wheelchair-bound for life. Gray's death after falling from the attic was ruled an accident, since he wasn't wearing any safety harness, and I finished some of the details there all as if he was actually doing the repairs. One day, I approached my wife and said to her, "You caused me so much pain with your actions. And now look at how your so-called love has ended. I will never do anything like that again. I swear." "Please forgive me," she replied tearfully. "Yes, you won't. And you know why? Because I'm divorcing you." She looked at me in astonishment. "But where will I go? What will I do?" She burst into tears. "Oh, now you're crying? You should have thought about that before. Don't worry. I'll take you to shelter where they'll take care of people like you. I can't bear to look at your face knowing what you did to me." Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.